Junko Furuta, born on January 18, 1971, was a 17-year-old Japanese high school student who became a victim of a horrific crime. She was abducted, raped, tortured, and ultimately murdered. Her abuse was mainly perpetrated by 4 male teenagers: Hiroshi Miyano, aged 18, Joe Ogura, 17, Shinji Minato, 16, and Yasushi Watanabe, 17. This tragic incident unfolded over a 40-day period, starting on November 25, 1988. In Japan, the case is infamously known as the concrete-encased high school girl murder case, as her body was discovered inside a concrete-filled drum. The brutality of the case shocked Japan, and it is regarded as one of the worst instances of juvenile criminality in the country's post-war history. Furuta grew up in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, where she lived with her parents and 2 brothers. At the time of her murder, she was a senior at Yashio Minami High School and worked part-time at a plastic molding factory, saving money for a planned graduation trip. She also accepted a position at an electronics retailer, planning to work there after graduation. Furuta was well liked by her classmates and teachers, maintained high grades, and had infrequent absences. According to her friends, she dreamed of becoming an idol singer. All 4 members of the group had dropped out of high school in the summer of 1988 and became involved in organized crime as chinpira, or low-ranking yakuza. They began using Minato's family home in Adachi, Tokyo, as a hangout. Starting in October, they engaged in various crimes including theft, assault, and rape. On November 8th, the group abducted a 19-year-old woman in Adachi and gang-raped her in a hotel. During Furuta's confinement, on December 27th, they abducted another 19-year-old woman in Adachi and gang-raped her in a motel. On the evening of November 25, 1988, Miyano and Minato rode around Misato on their motorcycles with the intention of robbing and raping local women. They spotted Furuta, who was on her way home from her part-time job. Acting on Miyano's orders, Minato kicked Furuta off her bicycle and fled the scene. Miyano, under the pretense of witnessing the attack by coincidence, approached Furuta and offered to walk her home. By tricking her and gaining her trust, Miyano took Furuta to a nearby warehouse and threatened her, claiming to be a member of the Yakuza and saying that he would spare her only if she followed his orders. That night, Miyano took Furuta by taxi to a hotel in Adachi, where he raped her. He later called Minato's house and bragged to Ogura about the rape, after which Ogura instructed him not to let Furuta leave. In the early morning hours of November 26th, Miyano took Furuta to a park near the hotel, where Ogura, Minato, and Watanabe were waiting. They told her they knew where she lived, and that the Yakuza would kill her family if she attempted to escape. Minato agreed to allow Furuta to be confined in a room on the 2nd floor of his house in Adachi, for the purpose of gang-raping her. Furuta was held captive for the next 39 days. On November 27th, Furuta's parents contacted the police about her disappearance. To discourage further investigation, the kidnappers forced Furuta to call her mother 3 times to convince her that she had run away but was safe and staying with friends. When Minato's parents were present at the house where she was being confined, Furuta was forced to act as his girlfriend. The group eventually dropped this pretense when it became clear that Minato's parents would not report them to the police. The parents later claimed that they did not intervene because they were afraid of their own son, who had been increasingly violent toward them. On the night of November 28th, Miyano and the others, along with Nakamura and Ihara, gang-raped Furuta. After the assault, Miyano shaved her pubic hair with a razor and used a match to burn her genital area. In early December, as punishment for an escape attempt, the group repeatedly punched Furuta in the face, and Miyano burned her ankles with a lighter. They forced Furuta to dance to music while naked, masturbate in front of them, and stand on the balcony in the middle of the night with little clothing. They inserted objects into her vagina and anus, including a metal rod and a bottle. They also forced her to drink large amounts of alcohol, milk, and water, smoke 2 cigarettes simultaneously, and inhale paint thinner fumes. In one attack in mid-December, Furuta was beaten by the group under the pretext that Miyano had stepped on a puddle of her spilled urine. After this, he burned her thighs and hands several times with lighter fluid. During this time, Furuta, unable to bear the repeated assaults, would sometimes plead for her captors to kill her. By the end of December, Furuta was severely malnourished, having been fed only small amounts of food and eventually only milk. Due to her injuries and burns, she could no longer go to the downstairs toilet and was thereafter confined to the floor of the room in a state of extreme physical and mental weakness. Her appearance had drastically changed after repeated beatings, with her face becoming so swollen that it was difficult to recognize her, and her infected wounds began to emit a foul odor. On January 4, 1989, after losing money in a game of mahjong the night before, Miyano decided to take his anger out on Furuta. He ignited a candle and dripped hot wax on her face, placed 2 shortened candles on her eyelids, and forced her to drink her own urine. Furuta was lifted and kicked, fell onto a stereo unit, and began convulsing. To prevent blood from staining their hands, the group covered their hands in plastic bags before beating her with their fists and an iron exercise ball, dropping the ball on her abdomen several times. Miyano poured lighter fluid on Furuta and set her on fire. She made weak attempts to extinguish the flames but eventually stopped moving. The assault lasted for about 2 hours, after which Furuta died at 10 a.m. Less than 24 hours after her death, Minato's brother called to inform him that Furuta appeared to be dead. Fearing that their crime would be discovered, the group wrapped Furuta's body in a blanket and placed it in a large travel bag. They then put the bag in a metal drum and filled it with wet concrete. Around 8 p.m. on January 5th, the group drove to a vacant lot near a construction site on the island of Wakasu in Koto, Tokyo, and dumped the drum there. In early 1989, Miyano and Ogura were arrested for their kidnapping and gang rape of another woman in December. During police interrogation, Miyano mistakenly believed that Ogura had already confessed to Furuta's murder and that the police were aware of his culpability. He then revealed the location of her body. Initially, the police were puzzled by his confession, as they were questioning him about a different murder. The drum containing Furuta's body was recovered on March 29th, and she was identified via fingerprints. Minato, Watanabe, Minato's brother, Nakamura, and Ihara were also arrested. The identities of the defendants were sealed by the court, as they were all juveniles under the age of 20. However, journalists from the Shukan Bunshin tabloid uncovered their identities and published them, arguing that the accused did not deserve to have their right to anonymity upheld, given the severity of the crime. In July 1990, all were found guilty and sentenced by the Tokyo District Court for abduction, for the purpose of sexual assault, confinement, rape, assault, murder, and abandonment of a corpse. All 4 appealed. In July 1991, 3 were re-sentenced to longer terms by the Tokyo High Court. Hiroshi Miyano was originally sentenced to 17 years in prison, then re-sentenced to 20 years, the longest sentence typically given in Japan short of life imprisonment, which had been sought by the prosecution. Miyano's parents sold their family home and paid Furuta's parents $50 million, about $350,000, in compensation, which their son's defense presented as a mitigating circumstance. A court-ordered psychological evaluation at the trial established that Miyano had a learning disability that did not impair his brain function but delayed his emotional development. After his release in 2009, he changed his last name to Yokoyama. He reportedly boasted about his connections to the Yakuza and involvement in pyramid schemes. In 2013, Miyano was arrested on suspicion of bank fraud and placing scam calls, but remained silent and was not charged. Joe Ogura was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison and was released in 1999. He changed his last name to Kamisaku and worked in IT jobs after his release, but later returned to organized crime after his past became known. In 2004, Ogura was arrested for assaulting Takatoshi Isono, an acquaintance he believed was involved with his girlfriend. Ogura shoved Isono into the trunk of his car and drove him to his mother's bar in Misato, where he assaulted him for 4 hours. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for this crime and released in 2009. Shinji Minato was originally sentenced to 5 to 6 years in prison, then re-sentenced to 5 to 9 years. His parents and brother were not charged. After his release in 1998, Minato moved in with his mother. In 2018, Minato, then unemployed, was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after striking a 32-year-old man with a metal baton and slashing his neck with a knife during a dispute over a parking spot. In 2019, he was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison, suspended with probation for 3 years. Yasushi Watanabe was originally sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison, then resentenced to 5 to 7 years. He appealed the verdict to the Supreme Court of Japan, but his appeal was denied in July 1992. He was released in 1996 and left his hometown to live with his mother. From the time the case was first reported in the media, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department received numerous calls and letters from the public demanding severe punishment for the perpetrators, including life imprisonment or the death penalty. The Tokyo District Court also received many letters criticizing the perceived leniency of its sentencing, although a majority of legal professionals surveyed stated that the sentences were appropriate based on precedent. Furuta's funeral was held on April 2, 1989. During the ceremony, one of her friends delivered a eulogy written by her classmates. It expressed deep sorrow over her suffering and a commitment to ensuring that Junko's death would not be in vain. Her classmates vowed to strive for a world free of such heinous crimes and remembered her fondly, stating, "Jun-chan, there's no more pain or suffering now. Rest peacefully." Furuta's intended future employer presented her parents with the uniform she would have worn in her job, which was placed in her casket. At her graduation, the principal presented her parents with her diploma. The location on Wakasu where her body was discovered is now an industrial zone, a stark reminder of the tragedy that unfolded. So this was the sad story of Junko Furuta. Do you think justice had served? If not, do let me know in comment section. And if you like this video, please do subscribe my channel. Thank you.